evening, everybody. Glad to see such a big group of you today. So, you may not realise, but you're currently sitting in, or tuning into, if you're online, one of the most extraordinary places in the world, the Knowledge Quarter in the heart of London. Like many areas in cities that grow a particular character or evolve around a professional industry, we've developed a kind of gravity drawing in like-minded people and organisations. From the British Museum, one of the oldest institutions in the area, to Google DeepMind, just around the corner, this 1 mile radius of King's Cross has evolved in the last 200 years into a truly remarkable place. Today we're home to many of the world-leading scientific, artistic, cultural and heritage institutions, and all within walking distance of each other. But what makes this place truly special is what happens when all of these curious and passionate and inquisitive and dedicated minds, like yourselves, mingle with each other in parks, in coffee shops, at the library. These serendipitous encounters spark ideas that can change the world. Together with our partners, with which we have over 100, we're here to make this place where people and organisations thrive and new things take root, a place where social, cultural and commercial value can grow. And we're here to help unlock the transformative potential of all of this incredible knowledge and make sure that we become a true living, breathing knowledge quarter and not just a place with lots of impressive knowledge organisations. And we do this by finding ways to open up, to bring together and to share our combined knowledge, because you know that when you connect knowledge, you create possibilities. Tonight's Turing Lecture perfectly exemplifies this spirit of collaboration, bringing together two of our esteemed partners, the Alan Turing Institute, the UK's National Institute for Data and Artificial Intelligence, and King's Place, a world-class music and arts venue and registered charity. It's this power of having pioneering technology and culture, science and art, right next to each other, enhancing each other's impact that makes the Knowledge Quarter so unique, and according to The Economist, the best hope for the British economy. It's now my pleasure to hand over to Alex, who will kick off tonight's final Turing Lecture of this year, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jodie, and good evening and a really warm welcome to everyone who's joining us tonight, both in person, there's lots of you, and online. My name is Alex Crook. I'm part of the communications team at the Alan Turing Institute, and it's my pleasure to be hosting the third and the final event of the 2024 Turing Lecture Series, Can We Trust AI?, in partnership with the Knowledge Quarter. For those who are new to the Turing Lectures, welcome, and for those of you who are returning, welcome back. The Alan Turing Institute is the UK's National Institute for Data Science and AI, and the Turing Lectures are our flagship event series, which have been running since 2016. This year's series comes as the Turing is embarking on a new strategy focused on generating high-quality research and translating it into real-world impact and deployment. Our goals are to advance world-class research and apply it to national and global challenges, build skills for the future, and drive an informed public conversation around data science and AI, which is why we're here today. We really want to ensure that everyone can debate and understand the benefits and risks of AI technologies. We also invite you to sign up to the Turing's newsletter to stay up to date with all our events coming up in 2025 and to be the first to hear about dates and ticket releases for next year's Turing Lecture Series. This 2024 series of the Turing Lectures explores the complex relationship between AI and society, and it examines its impact on our democratic processes, on decision-making systems, and, crucially, on trust. There are increasingly few areas of our lives that are not in some way touched by AI, whether that's at work, or in healthcare, or in the content we consume both online and offline. And at the same time, these technologies are transforming the labour market, changing the nature of warfare and of surveillance, and their growth is placing ever greater demands on the environment. One of the challenges facing us is understanding how we can live with AI and what we need to be able to do so harmoniously, which leads us on to this evening's speaker, Professor Shannon Vallor. Shannon is the Baillie Gifford Chair in the Ethics of Data and Artificial Intelligence at the Edinburgh Futures Institute at the University of Edinburgh. There, she directs the Centre for Technomoral Futures and is co-director of the UKRI's Bridging Responsible AI Divides programme. Her research explores how AI, robotics, and data science reshape human character, habits, and practices, and her work includes advising policymakers and industry on the ethical design and use of AI. Shannon's going to be leading tonight's conversation, but we want you to be part of it as well. So please tweet your thoughts and tag us and use the hashtag Turing Lectures. We'll have about 20 minutes at the end to ask questions. If you're in the room, you'll be able to do that in person, and if you're online, that will be via Slido. So Shannon, over to you.
Thanks very much, Alex. Thanks to the Knowledge Quarter and to the Alan Turing Institute for having me here tonight, and thanks to all of you for coming for the conversation. So the conversation tonight is trying to answer the question, can we live with AI? My new book, The AI Mirror, uses the mirror metaphor to help us better understand how today's powerful AI tools work, what they are and what they are not, what they can do for us and what they can't, what they can do but probably shouldn't. Let's kick off tonight by hearing from you. In what areas of life, and this is for those of you with Slido, do you think AI could never replace human insight? So let's stop there. Use the QR code to just pop into Slido, and you can just type in your answer quickly as you can, and then we'll get some sort of word cloud situation that will help us get a sense of what you might want to say about this. Creativity. Good. We've already got some folks online coming in here. Therapy. Ah, interesting. Love. Care. Manual work. Priests. You know what's interesting about this, of course, is that several of these things have already been attempted to be automated by AI. There are robot priests in Japan. We have therapy chatbots available on your phones right now. I'm not advising you to download one. But you know, there's intuitions that we all have about the limits of artificial intelligence and the uniqueness of human insight that's rooted in lived experience. And that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight. And it's a lot of what I talk about in my book. So let's go back to that. In the book, I talk about AI in the context of our humanity. Oops, sorry. Skipping ahead. And what I mean there is a lot of those things that you put on Slido, the capabilities that we most treasure in the human animal, the ones that we see as most essential to our shared flourishing together on this planet. So in this lecture, I'm going to pose the question, can we live with AI? And that we is defined not just as you and me and all who are watching and listening, but as the human family as a whole. And that's important. So let's go back to that question, can you live with AI? Can we live with AI? And ask another question for Slido. Can you live without AI? What do you think? So here it's a multiple choice. No, absolutely not. Perhaps, but I'd struggle. I'm not sure. Yes, I would love to live without AI. Ooh, interesting. Okay, well, it's still early days. We're going to give you some time to chime in here. It's a really interesting question, isn't it, to turn it around? Can you live without AI? All right, so it seems like a lot of you would very much like that. But an equal number think that you'd struggle to do so. And a smaller but not insignificant number really would not embrace that prospect. So let's continue the conversation here. If you're in this room with me, you can probably live with AI. It might even save your life. The sensors in your brand new car's AI network might alert you to an imminent brake or steering failure that would have previously caused a crash. Medical diagnostic AI might help your radiologist spot a tumor early or alert hospital staff that you're developing sepsis before it's too late. AI might design a drug for an otherwise terminal illness that you develop a decade from now, and you might be lucky enough to afford it even if the NHS can't. But don't confuse that singular, fortunate fact, if that applies to you, with a good answer to the question. I likely can live with AI, and most of you likely can too. But there are many who will not be able to live with AI. For example, those in war zones like Gaza who are already being targeted for airstrikes by mindless algorithms with no understanding of the value of a human life. Or those who are culled by authoritarian governments who will use AI to automate the identification of their political opponents. Or those who will die of thirst because the water they need is diverted to cool the new data centers that AI companies are lobbying to expand all over the planet. But even then, I'm still talking about people living today. The question becomes more urgent and infinitely more important when we extend its scope to future generations. Much of my talk will be concerned with how challenging it is to answer that question when we do. Consider, for example, the insatiable hunger of AI companies for new reservoirs of energy, rare earth minerals, and water to enable the growth of the data centers needed to power AI systems around the world. Microsoft has made a deal to reopen the notorious 3 Mile Island nuclear reactor in the United States. Cities and nations around the world are now hedging on their previously committed to climate targets that to keep them now would require a more modest pace of AI adoption. To give just one example, the city of Omaha, Nebraska had pledged to stop burning coal for the sake of residents, particularly residents of North Omaha, a minority neighborhood suffering life-threatening respiratory disease from chronically polluted air. Omaha has reportedly now reneged on the pledge after striking deals with Google and Meta to open new data centers that the Omaha Power Utility estimates will be responsible for 2/3 of its projected growth in energy needs. So, ask the residents of North Omaha if they can live with AI. But what about our children and our children's children? Can they live with AI? Let's listen to ex-Google CEO Eric Schmidt earlier this year responding to a question about how to make AI models and data centers more energy efficient. So this is a video. We're going to hear this for about 2 minutes now.
All of that will be swamped by the enormous needs of this new technology. And because it's a universal technology, and because it's the arrival of an alien intelligence, right, something we don't understand, we may make mistakes with respect to how it's used. But I can assure you that we're not going to get there through conservation. That's the key point. And the economics will drive it anyway. My own opinion is that we're not going to hit the climate goals anyway because we're not organized to do it. And the way to do it is with the things that we're talking about now. And yes, the needs in this area will be a problem, but I'd rather bet on AI solving the problem than constraining it and having the problem, if you see my plan.
Yeah, we see your plan. The plan, so it seems to me, is to tell future generations that we gambled on their survival so that corporations today could extract maximum profit from what Schmidt calls an infinite demand. Those are his words. He says there's infinite demand for power-hungry AI, and that we should fill that demand or seek to rather than conserve now to limit the damage to future generations later. And the hope is AI will bail us out just in time. Now, I wanted you to hear something else in Schmidt's words. He said, all our valiant efforts to make AI more efficient will simply be swamped by the enormous needs of this new technology. What needs does AI have? He didn't say your needs, he said needs of this new technology. Does AI need to breathe clean air? Does it need clean water to drink to stave off dysentery? Does AI need to live? Now, you might be confused by his reference to the arrival of an alien intelligence, which might make you think of a film like Arrival, where the needs of the intelligent aliens rightly come to be seen as akin to ours in their moral importance. But nothing has arrived here. AI systems are built by people. And as I'll make clear in this talk, these tools that we've built out of data and math are no more alien than your own reflection in the mirror, and just as mindless, however useful. A mindless machine has no needs, yet Schmidt speaks of its needs as swamping those of future generations. And that's telling. So, can we live with AI or not? Now, we also have to ask ourselves what we mean by the question itself. In my remarks so far, I've been interpreting it as a matter of survival. Can we live out our natural lives with AI in the picture? But the question's inherently ambiguous, at least in English. Can you live with it often means, is this minimally acceptable to you? Does it allow you to go on living in the way that you want to? Or does it do some kind of damage that will compromise your life, make your life somehow lesser even though it continues? Now, I think understanding the question that way brings it home even to those of us living today, even those of us in this room. I can survive with AI, I'm pretty sure, but I'm not sure I can live with it, at least not if we carry on with it in the way that we're heading. Another way of asking the question depends on how we interpret the word can. And at this point in the talk, you're probably already regretting coming to a lecture by a philosopher, since if you ask us one simple question in plain English, like can you live with AI, we will turn it into 12 questions. But forgive me, because these distinctions do matter. The can in can we live with it implies mere possibility, not probability. I can climb Mount Everest, but I probably won't. We should want to be confident that we will live with AI, not just that it's possible. And more than this, we should be confident that we will live well with it, not just grimly carry on breathing in a world where our relationships with others, our knowledge, and our environment have been degraded by irresponsible uses of AI. In recent years, I've been thinking more and more about the promise of innovation and technology, and how much of that promise has actually been stolen from us over the past few decades. In 2022, when I was thinking about these things, I wrote this piece in MIT Technology Review, and it resonated with a lot of people. It actually started as a Twitter thread that went viral, and then MIT Technology Review asked me to make an essay out of it. It was called, "We Used to Get Excited About Technology. What Happened?" I compared the current tech ecosystem with the history of 20th century innovation, which led us to expect to live in worlds where everything from the quality of education to the quality of the streets we walk on was measurably better. At the turn of the century, we had the internet at our fingers, high-speed rail, and a green energy transition on its way. Hell, we'd even healed the ozone layer. Sure, we still had a lot of problems, but the innovation ecosystem was, for the most part, at the turn of the century, aimed at tackling them. Today, in many of the countries where we consume the most new tech, we have crumbling schools and healthcare systems, an internet and media system that's increasingly poisoned by disinformation, dirtier rivers and beaches than a decade ago, anti-vaccine politics, more lonely, anxious young people, and climate targets we're backing away from faster than an angry bear. In the US, supposedly the beating heart of the world's innovation ecosystem, we're about to kill off all the 20th century regulations and economic incentives that created investment in new technologies for food safety, for environmental cleanup, and for infectious disease prevention. But hey, at least we have Instagram and TikTok and eyeglasses with cameras in them and VR headsets and AI to befriend or date our kids, make our art and music for us, write our books for us. Is this what we asked for from tech? Is this what we wanted? Is this what we needed? How did we allow ourselves to get here? Now, there's a whole talk to be written to answer that question, but let's not go there. Let's ask, where do we go from here? And what role do we have AI play in that? Because AI is not going away, and I don't think it should. I still want that kind of AI that can tell me what part of my city will flood tomorrow, or what medical treatment is the best match for my genetic profile, or how we might make our crops here in the UK more resistant to heat and moisture in a future that's going to bring us far too much of both. What I don't want is the kind of AI that makes it harder for us to live or harder to live well. Because right now, that's mostly what we're getting, and we shouldn't just live with it. To help you see why, I'm going to introduce you now to some concepts from my new book. And I'm going to talk about mirrors first, because that will help us ground this talk in a real sense of what AI is today and what it isn't, what we can get from it and what we can't. And then I'm going to talk about AI's impact on 3 dimensions of living that are essential to humanity: our space, our time, and our stories. Understanding AI and its implications for humanity is a daunting and ever-expanding task. We need to grasp AI's accelerating impacts on democracy, education, science, media, the arts, and our climate. We have to consider how AI is changing how we acquire information, how we carry out our daily work, how we make life and death decisions, how we find companionship, and how we write books. How do you understand a new social force so vast and encompassing that it is all at the same time changing how we make food, music, love, laws, and war? When we need to understand a new thing, we seek a metaphor, a way to link the new thing with something that we already understand. No metaphor is ever perfect, but the mirror metaphor for AI is far more apt and illuminating and much safer and less deceptive than the familiar metaphor that we're often encouraged by the AI industry to use for understanding their tools, namely the metaphor of a mind. You might wonder how a mirror can possibly be a more fitting and useful metaphor than a mind for something that contains the word intelligence, a word that we only associate with minds. So let me explain. So in some sense, all technologies are mirrors, mirrors of us. Technology is an extension of human values and imagination into the built world. Technology is human all the way down. Every technology, from the wheel to the book to the engine to the computer, reflects what humans of certain times and places thought was worth doing, worth making, worth enabling, or worth trying. But today's AI tools are mirrors in a much more powerful sense. Before I explain how this can be true, it's really important to point out that AI is not one technology. It's many. AI is much more than technology, too. It's a distinct field of scientific research, one that my own university has been carrying on at the University of Edinburgh for 60 years. So it's important that we don't reduce AI to a simple product. But today, most people do know AI as a suite of commercial tools and techniques for solving human problems with computers. And the mirror metaphor is a stronger match for some kinds of AI than others. It's best suited to describe machine learning tools trained on large volumes of human-generated data, which fortunately happens to be the kind of AI that you've heard the most about lately. Namely, large language models and their cousins, the foundational technology behind consumer-facing generative AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. So let's find out how these tools have shaped your thinking already. Do you have more faith in the future of human intelligence or machine intelligence? This is another Slido question. So go to your Slido and tell me what you think. Interesting. Ooh, moving around a lot. Let's give it just a few more seconds to get as many voices in here as possible. All right. So human intelligence is winning out, but machine intelligence is coming up close behind. And I've seen it flip a few times. So let's see what your faith in machine intelligence, for those of you that answered the question in that way, let's see what that faith is based on. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds of how large language models are constructed. And that's the kind of AI that I'm going to talk about. But a simplified account of how mirrors work can help anyone grasp the basics. So when you see an image in a glass mirror, it's a result of 3 interacting components. The first is a polished and coated glass surface that has the required physical properties to receive and reflect light. The second component is the light itself, and the third is the reflected image that you see when you look at the glass. Now, when you talk to a large language model, a very similar set of components is interacting with you. First, corresponding to the polished glass surface is the machine learning algorithm. That's a set of encoded software instructions for training something called a machine learning model. A machine learning model is a large, complex mathematical structure extracted from an initial body of training data. Now, the learning algorithm first structures and then further trains the model by specifying how that model will change as it is exposed to incoming data. Now, that's a lot like how the physics of a polished mirror will determine how the glass will receive and reflect incoming light, right? Different properties of the mirror, different properties of reflection. So imagine if a mirror's glass surface could be physically altered in subtle ways by the light that fell on it, such that the more light hit the mirror, the better the glass performed in reflecting it. Now you have a basic intuitive grasp of how machine learning models work. We create a reflective mathematical surface using a type of algorithm that can polish that model's surface further by being exposed to more data. When the initial training process is complete, the mirror is polished to a finished state, and we have a mathematical structure, a trained model, that can receive and successfully reflect the patterns in any new relevant data given to it. And we can even fine-tune the model, polish it a little bit more with special sets of data. Okay, now, the second component, let's come to that. Well, the second component of a mirror that I mentioned was light. Data is the light that falls on machine learning mirrors. Instead of visible light falling on physically polished glass surfaces, AI mirrors work when stored digital data falls on mathematically polished algorithmic surfaces. The model gets its initial properties, what we call weights or parameters, by means of exposure to a torrent of digital light. Our data, all the hoarded data that large AI companies have grabbed and scraped and sometimes stolen from us so that they can beam our collected light into their new tools, training them to reflect new light, new data inputs back to us in ways that look intelligent. And that's the third and final component of an AI mirror structure. The reflected images that they show back to us are the outputs that we get when we use the model, whenever we enter the new light of our prompts and queries, whether those are typed by hand into a ChatGPT window, spoken into your phone, or by a gesture, like pressing an icon on your screen. The answers that we get back from the model those intelligent-seeming replies in text, audio, or video form, are just composite reflections of the structures of the data taken from us that now resides in the model, embedded as that mathematical structure. And if they're just mirrors made of math, though, why do the responses of a large language model sound so intelligent, so conscious, sometimes even alive? It's because they're reflections of data taken from intelligent, conscious, living beings, from us. But if you now understand that this is a mirror image of intelligence, you realize that what looks intelligent isn't. Think about when you walk into your bathroom in the morning and look in the mirror. You know very well that there is not a second face with you in that room, no second body. If you're alone, there's only one face, one body in the bathroom with you. It's yours. And then there's a mirror image of it. You know that the image of the face you're looking at has no depth, no warmth, no smell, no life. It's a reflection, not a duplicate. A reflection of a face is not a face. A reflection of a flower is not a flower. It needs no water. A reflection of a flame is not a flame. It does not burn. A reflection of a mind is not a mind, and it does not think. Reflections are their own kind of thing. And as psychologists have demonstrated, only an infant or a creature who hasn't passed the cognitive stage, commonly known as the mirror test, will confuse the thing with its reflection. Yet AI companies and their leaders who speak so glibly of the arrival of alien intelligences very much want you to fail the mirror test when it comes to their products. They want you to believe that you are seeing a new kind of intellect emerging on the other side of that algorithmic mirror. They want you to believe that you're seeing something even smarter, more powerful, and more capable than you are. Something that can not only help you, but teach you, comfort you, even speak and write for you. And one day that can't come soon enough for many who control the image, replace you. Now that's the power of the conjurer's mirror illusion, and the danger. Much like the Roman poet Ovid's tragic figure of Narcissus, the boy who lost his life to his captivation by his own reflection, we are today at risk of losing ourselves in our AI mirrors, slowly becoming convinced that the thing on the other side is just as real, just as much of a mind as we are. Maybe one day even more so. In my book, I describe more fully the power of these algorithmic mirrors to not only usefully reflect and magnify valuable patterns in our data, a power that can be life-saving when used responsibly, but also, like all mirrors, used to distort, to confound, and occlude our reality. For example, AI mirrors not only reproduce and magnify the patterns of injustice in our data, they routinely produce even more distorted versions of these, bouncing back to us funhouse mirror images of our histories of racial abuse and gender exclusion, reflecting past worlds when there were no women CEOs, no women artists or artists of color. Yeah, that world never existed, actually. Or non-existent worlds where all attractive people are light-skinned, or where white people never use social services, and where productive people are only young men with way too much hair product. Now, their unpredictable distortions can be absurd, right? These are clearly distortions. But think about the kinds of distortions that we saw with Google's fine-tuned AI that wildly overcompensated for its underlying biases by portraying Nazis as racially diverse. Or its AI overview tool, when it told us that nutritionists want us to eat 1 rock a day, or that you should glue your cheese onto your pizza to secure it. Or X's Grok bot, when it made up a news story about Mayor Eric Adams of New York sending the NYPD into the subway to shoot the April earthquake before it could strike again. Now, I think we actually need to be really grateful for these more ridiculous distortions, for they very quickly puncture the mirror illusion of a machine mind. And they show the utter absence of true thinking and understanding behind these hollow reflections. And we need that perspective when AI falsehoods sound dangerously real, as they often will. Like the Grok newsbot falsely claiming that Iran had struck Israel with missiles in April. Or when New York City's AI bot from Microsoft was confidently advising local businesses to break the law. But it's important to know that there's no more thinking behind the reflection when these AI mirror images get things right. AI tools can often get the reflection right. That's why they're useful. And when they do, they serve the primary purpose of a mirror, to reveal things that can be impossible for us to see otherwise. While the reliability of large language model outputs remains a major problem, the power of AI mirrors is well demonstrated by machine learning models trained on narrower but higher quality data sets than what we see large language models being trained on. Those narrower, more task-focused kinds of AI are the types of models that can reveal early signs of cancer or sepsis in our medical data, or evidence of insider trading in our email and banking history. Like all AI mirrors, though, they're also powerful magnifiers of the patterns in our data, from subtle truths to the harmful stereotypes and unjust biases I just showed you that they reproduce in nearly every context. But mirrors do a lot more than reveal and magnify our reality. Because they can also distort reality, they are powerful instruments of deception. There's a reason that we write warnings on glass mirrors, like this here. Mirrors that distort our vision of what is true. We use those warnings as guardrails. But we don't have those guardrails on AI tools today. AI mirror images are now being widely used to confound us, as mirrors have always been, by entertainers and charlatans alike. They can send us into surprise laughter at Balenciaga Pope. But they can also deceive us with fraudulent deepfake images, audio, and video designed to gin up your political rage over a non-existent campaign speech, make you break up with your involuntarily AI pornified girlfriend, or get you to wire cash to the fake face of your pleading parent or child who you would swear is begging you over video for help in their own distinctive voice, moving their own injured body, and shedding their own desperate tears. In my book, I ask us to consider the heavy social, psychological, and environmental cost to us of this new mirror world, and how we might refuse the offer and rewrite its terms in our favor. But in this talk, I want to take a different turn. I want to focus on how these AI mirrors, which can be used as tools to enlarge our possibilities, enhance our freedom, and secure our future, are instead increasingly being used as tools to steal these from us, to snatch away from us the space and time that we use to think, the power that we hold to know and craft our own narrative, and the confidence we need to choose and build more humane futures. This talk is a call to reclaim our humanity, to retake our space, our time, and our stories. We might be able to live without these, but why would we want to? So now that the mirror metaphor has been explained, we're going to slow down the visuals a bit while I lay out some deeper ideas. In my book, I talk about the space of reasons, especially the space of moral reasons. It's another metaphor, I'm sorry. Now, the philosopher Wilfrid Sellars spoke of the space of reasons as the field of shared human thinking, where we explore and exchange thoughts about what might justify our different beliefs and claims to one another. Knowledge is social, and it's made up not of singular truths or data points, but the web of justifying reasons that thinking weaves to hold those truths and our minds together in a shared grasp of reality. So the spatial metaphor is important. It reflects the fact that thinking is action. Like physical limbs, thoughts need space to move in. When we think, and especially when we reason, we need an understanding of the possibilities that still lie open to us. We need to be able to see ahead of us the contours of known reality that both constrain and enable our ambitions, whether navigating a shared physical reality, our social, economic, and political reality, or our moral reality. We need to explore together what the space of the real world allows and what it forbids to us. And so to reason, we need to use thought as a way to stretch into that open space and imagine the different paths that we might together travel through it. The space of reasons has to be held open in the mind for this to happen. That's why we speak in spatial terms of the virtues of an open mind or the vices of a closed mind. An open mind has room to think and reason with others, room to navigate objections and contradictions, space to chart the new routes that will justify unfamiliar or contested ideas. A closed mind is boxed in, immobilized, and helpless. And this is why, of course, philosophers following the model of Socrates are trained to ask many questions before they attempt to answer one, and to follow every answer with even more questions. That's why we're so super irritating. The questions are what hold open that space around the answers and allow for better ones to come along. AI tools can absolutely be designed to help us hold open the space of reasons, but for the most part, they aren't. They're designed to instantaneously and tirelessly fill our mental space with answers. The one intelligent thing you'll not hear a large language model say, unless you've specifically prompted it to do so, is, "I don't really know," or "I'm not sure," or "Why don't you tell me?" The version of AI Mirror is now being aggressively pushed by platform AI companies into the hands of educators, novelists, journalists, artists, doctors, judges, policymakers, scientists, and business leaders everywhere, is a mental space-filling machine. You want to know what Moby Dick is really about, besides a whale? Are you curious about the strongest and weakest arguments against imposing term limits on judges? Do you want to know what you should do to repair a damaged friendship? Do you want to know how to find a better ending to your novel? An AI mirror has the answers, or at least some kind of answers, and it will deliver them to you in milliseconds with a tone of unflagging confidence, so that you need not walk one more step through the endless space of reasons. The pesky business of thinking can be done away with as soon as possible. Efficiency at last. Because, of course, efficiency is the ultimate goal behind today's AI gold rush. We could try to use AI mirrors as aids to our own learning, thinking, and deciding together in the space of reasons, but we're told that would be less efficient. And it's not clear just how much help they can be, because unlike the high-dimensional vector space occupied by an AI model, the human space of reasons is not mathematically closed, but open to the future. Unlike our minds, which can invent entirely unprecedented patterns of thought, AI mirrors point backward in time. They know only the patterns of intelligence, the patterns in the light of our data that we've already created. They can only mirror the shapes of the thoughts we've already had. And this is not what it's like to be in the space of reasons, where our thoughts can move forward, not just trawl backward. In this space, our thoughts are not restricted to the shape of old reasons. They can also take on new shapes, forming new reasons. Like the light cones that constrain the travel of information in physics, AI mirrors cannot see or think into the future. They predict only what was already there, already seen in the data. So when I ask large language models about styles of art that have not yet been invented, they suggest extremely well-established artistic approaches like biosculpture or using technology to visualize emotional states. If you know anything about the arts, you know we spend a lot of time exploring these things already. We've been there and done that. AI systems are rear-view mirrors. Or try asking the latest GPT model, what kinds of stories have not yet been written? This is what happened when I did. These were its ideas of stories that have never been written. Yep, Exactly. All of these are stories that have been told and published before. Many of them are on my own bookshelf. Still, you might fine-tune a model, not to answer your questions, but to ask you new ones, or to point out new paths through the problem space that others have seen, but that you didn't even know were there to explore. Some people do have the skills, time, and independent motivation to adapt these tools for that purpose. But for most users, and especially for the companies and governments who are betting on these tools as magic productivity beans, the whole point of the tools and the only thing that justifies their immense cost is to save us all the time and effort of thinking. Right now, generative AI mirrors like GPT and Gemini can't really do this. They're still too distorted and unreliable. By design, they don't find facts. They make up outputs that look and sound like facts, which is a real problem when the truth actually matters. It's a real problem that science journals and courtrooms are now plagued with research articles and legal filings containing AI-generated errors, fake scientific images, citations of studies, and cases that don't exist. And because they can't actually think their way out of a paper bag, if the shape of that bag wasn't already seen in the training data, the algorithmic golden goose has yet to start laying really profitable eggs for most companies, as Goldman Sachs observed in a summer report that spooked the whole AI investment community, right? There was a little moment of panic there. But investors are doubling down. They're convinced that the next generation of AI mirrors will work out the kinks and deliver the dream. A machine that can do all the work of a mind without the inconvenient luxury and unpredictable freedom of thinking. And we can't take comfort in that prospect. It's actually the worst case scenario. The philosopher Alfred North Whitehead said in 1911 that civilization advances in proportion to the number of important mental operations that we can perform without thinking about them. He was speaking of mathematical techniques to solve complex problems with less effort, a kind of low-level cognitive automation in mathematics that allows us to save more of our mental energy for higher-order thinking and deciding. I mean, that's a pretty important thing to be able to do. But now that we have machine mirrors that will mimic the most plausible sounding outcome of any thought process at all, we need to ask Whitehead's ghost and ourselves, what thoughts do the civilized keep? In a 2021 magazine essay of that title in Noema, I compared the seemingly astonishing ability of AI mirrors to generate plausible sounding answers to nearly any complex problem to a robot being flung to the summit of a towering mountain by an immensely powerful catapult. The catapult here is that mathematical model. And the robot is the generative AI tool. Now, it's amazing, in a way, when the robot lands on the peak. But it's not mountain climbing. And when the robot, or the AI mirror, misses the right answer, it often misses not by feet, but by a mile. And God help the person who hires the robot as a mountain climbing guide, or a professor. Because if you ask an AI mirror to describe the reasoning it used to get an answer to a difficult problem, in this case, the cognitive mountain, more metaphors, you'll get a completely fictional, made-up path of reasons. The mathematical vector space it traversed to get the answer doesn't actually look anything like our mental space of reasons. They're just not isomorphic at all. So when asked to give its reasons, an AI model does the same thing it did to get the original answer. It makes up the best-sounding, most plausible guess at a valid chain of reasoning, which will often land in the ballpark, but might land 100 miles away. The point of the mountain climbing analogy is that thinking, like mountain climbing, is a skilled activity and an open-ended process, not an event. A person who gets to either kind of summit on the back of a flying robot learns squat about the mountain and acquires no skill. Just like mountain climbing, thinking requires repeated practice of scaling daunting peaks yourself. Thinking skills must be gradually cultivated and mastered in the shared social space of reasons. And it's these skills that allow a thinker to get up the next mountain, a new cognitive challenge they haven't seen before. So, Are we going to use AI mirrors to build those skills in ourselves or in the next generation? Right now, it's not looking that way. Because to use them for that purpose makes no one a quick buck. It makes our thinking better, but not faster or cheaper. That's a long-term investment we're talking about in human cognitive development that we need. And that's not what the AI market today wants. What the AI market wants is productivity with fewer steps. They want to shrink the human space of thinking as much as possible, not only because it saves time. We can go from data set to decision summit in 3 seconds, not 3 days, 3 weeks, or 3 years. But because it cuts out the middleman or woman, you. And you're not only slow, you're unpredictable, and so are your colleagues. You might question the whole task. ChatGPT is not. You might get together in the space of reasons and decide that the original problem is misframed, or not a problem to be solved at all. You might decide that the most efficient and profitable short-term solution is an unethical one, or an unsustainable one. You might turn left in the space of reasons when the market wants you to walk a straight line. And what better solution to that eternal problem of business and politics than offloading the task to a machine that doesn't need to walk with us in the space of reasons at all? I've been talking about space, and now I'm going to talk about time before we finish by talking about our stories. But these are all connected parts of life, of course. We know that space and time aren't separate from the standpoint of the universe. There's just space-time. And conscious beings are the only ones who can perceive them apart. And stories are just how conscious beings make sense of our lives, our perceived space and experience time, how we give them meaning, how we come to understand what might come next from each. As philosophers such as Paul Ricoeur have argued, narrative storytelling is not only the activity through which stable, reflectively aware selves come into being. It's how we grasp the full arc of our lives and our communities. Without the ability to tell and understand stories, there's no time, there's no history, only disconnected events. No whole lives lived well or poorly, just fleeting moments. Now, AI mirrors have a peculiar relationship with time that I've already mentioned. Like the massive optical mirrors in orbit that produced this image from NASA, by collecting light that traveled from the early universe, AI mirrors are confined to the light cone of the past. The future is utterly closed to them. For their predictions can only extend the patterns found in the data, which of course is only data we already have. As Arbeba Berhane has observed, AI is an inherently conservative technology. Generative AI tools like ChatGPT, DALL-E, and Gemini do have a kind of unpredictability built into them, of course, which is why they can often surprise and amuse us with their unexpected answers, images, or predictions. But that generative part of generative AI comes from a mechanism built in to introduce some artificial randomness into the selected output. Generative AI models even have control settings called things like temperature that allow you to ramp up that variance and inject more surprise into their results. But this, too, is just a reflection of the past. The surprise isn't actually a departure from those learned patterns. It just uses a wider spread of our historical data, a wider statistical distribution of the likely answers within that past data cone as the basis for the new prediction. So the guess is no less based on the past. It's just a slightly wilder guess. So just as our AI mirrors don't know the space of reasons our lives walk in, they don't know its time either. That is, they don't have what philosophers like Edmund Husserl called our temporal horizon, the human experience of an open and indeterminate world, held open by the flow of conscious time, where something new is always just over the horizon of our present experience and about to come into view. What comes into view is often familiar, recognizable. The sun rises every single day, just as it has in all of human history. The taxes are always due, and my cat always wants breakfast way too early. But things and events of startling new shapes do arrive from time to time on an utterly unpredictable schedule. How many of you 2 weeks ago thought Assad would fall this week? As the philosopher David Hume pointed out centuries ago, the unremovable wart on human reasoning is that we've got absolutely zero evidence that the future won't suddenly go all pear-shaped on us at any given instant. Life is utterly predictable until it isn't. But then that's a wart I'm eternally grateful for. Our ability to experience the future as open is an essential part of what makes us human, because it's the future, being a giant question mark, that is the heart of our cognitive, moral, political, and artistic freedom. It's what gives us the existential task of deciding each and every day and each and every moment just how much of our past we want to bring with us into the future, how much of it we want to leave behind, and what we want to create in the open space that is new. The Spanish philosopher José Ortega y Gasset called this the task of auto-fabrication, literally self-making. He said to be human is to be called to be an engineer of yourself, of your life, by choosing from your future's open possibilities which to make real. But also with others, you're called to be an engineer of the future forms of life we'll share together. We are engineers of human life and human futures, all of us. We might try to keep things looking much the same, but that too is an engineering choice, the conservative choice to carry the past forward. We can always choose otherwise, and sometimes we do. We abandon a commitment that we promised to hold for life, or we make a commitment we swore we'd never take on. We can extend our trademark artistic style into endless satisfying variations, or we can drop it on a dime and leave our audiences utterly baffled by our new tech. We can stick with the dire politics we know, or we can say to hell with this, we're changing the game. We can keep burning the world for the temporary benefit of a handful of billionaires, or we can say no more. But here's the thing. AI mirrors can't make these kinds of radically new choices. They are stuck pointing backward, reflecting what has been seen in the past. That's why their reflections keep regenerating the most common social biases and the most widespread errors of digital humanities history. It's why the speeches and essays and songs they generate are so weirdly generic and somehow hauntingly familiar. This regressive power of AI mirrors has been described by philosopher Mark Kokelberg as a kind of time machine, but it's a weird kind of time machine, one that can't take us into the future, one that just lets the patterns of the past keep leaking more and more into the present. And that's a real problem now that everyone, from government leaders to screenwriters, from university educators to criminal court judges and journalists, are being told by AI companies that we need to use AI to write the future, to predict from the past data cone what decision or word or idea is most likely to come next, and then automate that statistical ghost of the past into our lived reality, into our future. We live at a time where the most dominant economic, political, and environmental patterns of human activity on the planet are all under growing strain, because these patterns, for reasons that are tightly interwoven, are jointly unsustainable. They not only serve increasingly few of us well at the growing expense of everyone else, they endanger the future of the entire human family and all other intelligent life on the planet. Now, more than at any other point in human history, we need to exercise our collective power of auto-fabrication, the power that only human beings have to engineer another future, to turn the wheel in a new direction, to give ourselves more road to travel before we reach a cliff. AI mirrors, when used to optimize the efficient reproduction of human work and thought, won't invent that future. They'll steal it from us, or rather, they'll be the thieves' tools. What we need in order to reclaim the future for humanity is new tools, including new kinds of AI tools, and new systems of value that build them, that are designed to hold open and enlarge human space and human time. Time to write new story arcs for our lives, and time to give to our descendants to do the same. Yet to do that, we need to change the relationship between technology, life, and time. Today, we use algorithmic technologies from smartphones to social media platforms to video games to AI mirrors to generate content to fill all open time and all open mental space. The tendency to fill our time and space with any available distractions long predates the digital age, but only the digital age could deliver today's 24/7 torrent of on-demand content of endless variety and deceptively low cost, algorithmically fitted to your strongest existing preferences. This qualitative shift in the media age has been widely lamented in countless diagnoses of the ills of the attention economy, where the demands of platform business models and digital media politics mean that your eyeballs and your children's eyeballs are now the most prized object of economic and political control. Sure, those of us captured by the attention economy walked into the trap, but we had a good push. And once the doors closed behind us and all our friends and colleagues were in there with us, it got harder to see a way out that wasn't exile. And because of this, we increasingly do not know what it is to have unfilled time or to have unfilled mental space. And a growing number of us don't know what to do with it on those rare occasions that time and space does arrive, other than to fill it as quickly as possible with more algorithmic content. AI mirrors are the latest delivery system, not just for finding that content, but for producing it. And that's the moment when the digital revolution challenges our most vital human capability, the capacity and the will to tell and write our own stories. As many of you will know, and more than a few of you will lament, AI mirrors can be used to literally generate stories, any kind of story, as long as it's somehow like the stories we've already told, with maybe just a bit of random statistical noise thrown in for flavor. AI mirrors are being used to quickly and cheaply generate news stories, blog posts, and op-eds, turning the vocation of the human journalist at many cash-strapped outlets from a crafter of human narrative, something that takes time and the luxury of mental space, into a text polisher, a fact checker, and an enlivener of algorithmically generated instantaneous prose. The writer still has a vital role to play in most of these cases. AI mirrors are still too incompetent at storytelling to avoid needless repetition, cliches, and illogical contradictions. But AI developers are working hard to reduce those flaws, and at the same time, some audiences are learning to grudgingly live with them. Fiction writers are being encouraged to use AI to generate news story outlines, early drafts, possible plot twists, character motivation, and background sketches, and possible endings. We're reassured that AI can't yet write a whole novel that's worth reading, but from these fairly sorry, ragged pieces, a writer might assemble and polish a passable Frankenstein. Even those who aren't storytellers by profession are being marketed AI tools that will record the story of your work week or the story of your family vacation, summarize its highlights for your perusal later, prepare a diary record of it for your safekeeping, remind you of any follow-up actions, suggest a plan for executing those actions, and in the near future, it will take care of those actions for you. AI mirrors are being pushed on educators at schools and universities around the world, where we are told that they can help us more efficiently develop our lesson plans and structure our lectures, summarize for our quick review the key points of the readings we've assigned to our students, and even help generate feedback for those students on the bland insights about those readings that they increasingly use their AI mirrors to write for them. Many educators are vigorously resisting this campaign, but the platform and ed tech companies are relentlessly pushing AI into virtually every tool we use. If this trend continues, the result will be a classroom environment where the stories of our history, our literature, of politics, of scientific discovery are increasingly being told, read, interpreted, and critiqued by our machines. Some of you, like me, are old enough to remember this image from the 1985 movie Real Genius, where the professor, fully disenchanted with students tape recording his lectures and skipping class, starts playing his lectures, recorded from the podium by boombox, and skips the whole farce himself. Today, the farce is becoming reality, only instead of farce, we call it innovation. UCLA just announced the first completely AI-generated course. We can demand better. But first, we have to want better, and we have to believe that we deserve it. And at the moment, that's a challenge, perhaps for young people most of all. A recent Atlantic piece by Rose Horowitz titled "The Elite College Students Who Can't Read Books" described the growing resistance of university students to reading any extended narrative from a book down to a sonnet. In the article, a psychologist notes that digital media has altered young people's sense of what is worthy of attention. But in a shift from the age-old pre-digital phenomenon of students characteristically and opportunistically skipping the reading, the article highlights professors' worries that unlike previous generations, many of today's students seem to be skipping the reading not because they won't do it or don't want to, but because they can't. The account of a growing number of university students instantly shutting down at a single encounter with more than a few pages of narrative, experiencing the tracking of a long-form story as an impossible cognitive task, is not new to me. It's been a worry of many of us for a while. But AI mirrors are now promising to close that gap for students, launching them to the top of the exam or essay mountain in a single prompt, even preparing seemingly thoughtful and perceptive discussion questions to ask in class or tutorials, or coming up with likely objections to the core text. The important question is not whether today's students can make their way through the Iliad or War and Peace. The question is whether our students will retain the will, confidence, and capacity to participate in the vital human task of reading and writing their own stories, which requires the mental allowance of time and space. One of the things that's widely reported as uncomfortable for many digital natives and older readers alike is the experience of empty mental space, to allow mental quiet and space to arise and dwell in it, to not respond to the powerful impulse to fill it with something, anything, is a challenge for most of us. It's what the novelist knows as the torture of writer's block that pushes us to close the laptop and clean another part of the house. It's what a child knows as the torture of boredom that quickly takes on the tinge of anxiety until he grabs for the phone to scroll. It's what the journalist staring at a sheaf of notes or file of audio recordings feels when she can't begin to see the shape that these fragments must take. In the Atlantic piece, the psychologist states that boredom has come to feel unnatural to many young people. But that yawning empty space that boredom opens when we realize that we can bear it and live through it is a portal to a future on the other side. Empty mental space is where time opens and values are chosen. When the story could be anything, and yet the story as nothing feels unbearable, I choose something. And then I realize that I've made that chosen new thing matter in some way. I've brought it into reality, and it's part of my world, part of myself now. This is how lives are made. The new plot point was chosen not because it was already interesting and important to me, otherwise it would have already been within my grasp. It becomes interesting and important because I chose it, yanked it into the reality of my life from all those undefined possibilities on the other side of time's horizon. The innovative artist does something similar. When as a child I chose in desperate boredom to try to learn how to play my mother's guitar, or climb a big rock, or invent a new computer game, or pick up my father's dusty, neglected Bible and try to figure out what that was all about, I was choosing to make things important in my life that had not been important to me before. Even if I later abandoned some of them, my choice at that moment proved to me that I am free to make things matter, that my life is not a passive waiting game, but an action, a construction of meaning and value. I didn't understand that framing as a child, of course, but even then I knew implicitly, non-verbally, as a feeling that it was a kind of power, that I could be alone with my thoughts, and yet not captive to their present shape or their present formlessness. And these choices, more than all the choices that came easily because they followed a familiar pattern, became part of my story, in the way that all selves and lives are forged and shaped. We learn that we have power over the future, that we are not helpless victims of fate, by reaching across that void of mental space into time's open and formless horizon and bringing something over from that undefined future into our present world, giving it a place in our story, and by that choice making it real. We do that when we innovate in art and media and design. We do it when we come together to invent new politics. And we do it when we press new moral claims on the world. But to learn that power, we have to be given space and time to think and feel without someone else filling it for us. Empty space and quiet is the field where new life grows. It's the field of the future. And that's the opposite of what digital culture gives us. Modern digital life is much like a 90s Tetris game. Every moment is a challenge to fill the open space of existing as efficiently and seamlessly as possible. The blocks are falling faster and faster, and you must quickly slot them into their predictable and rational places. See what's coming next, what meeting, what exam, what tweet, what photo, what reel. React and process, like or save, fit it into the most likely slot, or let AI do it for you, but most importantly, leave no space in your life, in your mind, unfilled. We need instead to hold open the space of our lives and hold open our time so that we can write the next chapter of the human story and let it go somewhere new. That's the opposite of what AI currently offers us. In the words of Mark Kuckelberg, instead of using AI to save time by filling up the future with automated projections from the past, quote, we need to figure out how to make time in a different way, how to let in the future and make time for social change, how to make time for interpretation and judgment, and how to make time for people and their stories, end quote. AI mirrors can't tell our stories for us because they don't know why those stories matter. There's nothing at stake for an AI storyteller because an AI bot has no future, no life to make for itself. From the standpoint of a trained AI model, the shape of the mirror image, the arc of the data story has already been carved. Unlike the work of being human, its work has been done, and all that is left is to generate its most probable echoes until it is trained again. The image of our data that appears in the AI mirror can be dim or blurred or fogged or distorted, but it can't be unknown, unmade. For an AI mirror, there is no story still untold. Our narrative power of holding time and space open is the crucible of the self, but even more importantly, it is the crucible of the collective life of humanity, which will have a story that only we have the power and the duty to write. Unlike an AI model, we each and together sit on the edge of a future that is open, one pregnant with possible lives that need not reflect the past. Not unless we surrender to machines the power of telling our own stories. We can live with AI if we choose to, but we cannot live through it. Thank you.
An incredibly thought-provoking lecture. It's definitely provoked a lot of questions online, and I'm sure it's provoked loads in the audience. Just a reminder, if you're in the room with us, please raise your hand and someone will bring you a microphone to ask a question. We'll take 2 at a time just to save time. And if you're online, in the online world, then use the Slido via the code provided. We've got a few questions already, so I'm just going to kick off with one. They're never simple, Shannon. How do you qualify the type of AI you want in advance, like medical diagnostics or severe weather alerts, if you don't explore other not-so-useful AI use cases simultaneously?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Although I do think that the fact that we have considerable environmental costs associated with these tools as well as risks mean that we cannot afford the strategy of just infinite exploration, right? There are serious costs and harms to real people that are imposed by that strategy currently. So I think there is a moral need for a wise, prudent, and selective approach to AI development. And one of the things that I think is really important is to consider what is the evidence that AI is the right tool to solve this problem. A lot of the areas where we're seeing really exciting developments in AI, like in biotech. So think of, for example, Google DeepMind's AlphaFold, right? One of the reasons why that's such an amazing tool is because it solves a problem that we could never have solved without, eons of time to do it. There is a clear case there for even a fairly costly training process to actually jumpstart the fields of innovation in biotech and in pharmacology and medicine that need to move forward to address things like neurodegenerative diseases, right? So there we have a very clear case for the risk-benefit profile really justifying this particular path forward. But much of what the AI industry is doing right now doesn't look like that at all. Much of what the AI industry is doing is really focused on trying to make their money back as fast as possible by pushing AI into any corner of your life that it will fit, whether or not you've asked for it. How many of you have AI features in your workplace software that you didn't ask for and that you don't know how to turn off? Yeah, quite a few, right? So again, I think it's just about trying to make those discriminating choices. There's room for exploration, but there has to be a reason to explore. There has to be a problem that we can't solve. For example, the use of AI to replace college lecturers. We're actually doing fine at teaching. Teaching is the part of our job we actually want more time to do. It's the administrative work. If you give me an AI system to sort of automate all of the administrative form filling I have to do in my job, I'm all over that, right? Because that frees me up to do more of what I care about. But what's happening is that the people who are being given these tools are being pressured to use them to replace the core tasks and the core areas of expertise that we have, which makes no sense except as a kind of commercial strategy.
Thanks, Shannon. Fantastic answer. I'm going to take a couple of questions in the room. If you put your hands up, we've got one down here, and then another one there at the edge. We just got the one mic. Okay.
Thank you, Shannon, for the amazing talk. And just following on from that question that was posted online. So obviously, training these models requires a lot of time and money, and there is the commercial aspect that you talked about. So in terms of your work, maybe from what you've seen or thoughts going forward, outside of commercialization, do you see a role for governments? Would you think multiple governments should collaborate together to train a model? Do you think that should be funded by taxpayers? Like we're talking, how realistically can we make some of what you've talked about in your great lecture actually happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it points to something that we're not going to see it unless we change some of the incentives in the wider tech economy to actually provide incentives. They can be carrots or sticks for the opportunities to use AI for public good to actually be invested in. So there's a lot of discussion right now around AI for public good, right? And using AI in government, for example. But very often, it's the tech platform companies who are driving the bus and setting the priorities and dictating the terms. And this is actually the reverse of what we need, right? We need basically the terms to be defined by the publics that are most vulnerable to the harms of these systems, but also the publics who are most in need of what they can do for us. So part of it is about rebalancing the power within the tech ecosystem. And that's going to require governments, and you're right, to work together. Because what happens if an individual government tries to assert some sort of agency and dictate the terms in publicly acceptable ways to tech companies, the tech companies just play a game of arbitrage with another government or region that they can partner with who will not impose those kinds of requirements. So I do think that we need, much as we saw with kind of the efforts to constrain bad actors in environmental pollution. We need to share knowledge across different publics and governments about how we can change the incentive structure to reward companies who actually do think responsibly about how this technology can be developed and deployed, and to essentially take commercial opportunities away from companies that show themselves to be uninterested in that kind of effort.
Let's take another question in the room. I think we had one right there.
Thanks, Shannon, for such an inspiring lecture. You have another paper where you talked about how we've kind of lost the plot. My question is, what would it take for us to get back on track or to rediscover that plot?
Yeah, that's a question about, I think, this narrative that technology is something that we've forgotten is supposed to be for us. And that the power of science and technology was always sort of central to this notion of human progress. You notice you never hear the word progress anymore? You just hear the word innovation. Yeah, I can innovate by finding new ways to kill people in more creative and unprecedented fashion, and to do so at scale. That kind of invention, we saw plenty of that in the 20th century, right? That's innovation, sure. Is it the kind of innovation that we deserve? No. And so I think we need to be able to change the narrative amongst wider publics around what we can expect. I think we have lost a sense of what we deserve. And we're sort of passively just shrugging and saying, yeah, this is not exactly the future I wanted. These aren't exactly the tools that I wanted. My life's not getting better in all the ways that I want it to. But what can you do? Capitalism, right? I mean, part of what my book is trying to do is to sort of restart that engine of sort of political agency in us, so that we can sort of say, actually, this is bullshit. We demand better. We deserve better. And we've had better. That's the other thing I want to point out, right? It hasn't always been quite this bad. Of course, you know, tech and innovation has always been, you know, tied up with systems of political oppression, you know, the industrialization of militaries, right? I'm not trying to tell some nostalgic story where there was this golden age where technology was always aligned with human welfare. But it's really true that we've kind of lost even the sense that that's what we deserve in recent years, and we need to get that back. We need to get back that feeling of optimism that people had. If you remember, if you're old enough to remember what we thought the internet would be, right? We thought we had something that would actually be a public commons that would not just be turned against us in ways that would weaken our knowledge ecosystem, for example. The whole point of the internet was to boost the knowledge ecosystem and disseminate it more widely to everybody, make it more accessible, right? Instead, we're seeing the corruption of our information ecosystem. Why are we not in the streets screaming about that, right? Without the integrity of the information ecosystem, we are lost. Humanity requires quality information in order to act wisely and collectively for the future. So I just want people to get mad, but not the sort of destructive kind of mad, but the constructive kind of mad, where people work together and say, we actually deserve better than this, and we've had better than this, and we need to get back to that place where innovation is progress.
Following on from that, there's a few questions online asking a similar vein of what can we do? What levers can we pull as society to push AI in the right direction? And MJ asks, do you think academia and civil society can redefine the current unchecked pro-innovation narratives? How do we support that?
Well, there are a lot of academics and a lot of people that we work with in civil society who are doing that. The problem partly is that that message, first of all, sometimes due to our own way of speaking, doesn't reach wider audiences, right? We're used to speaking to one another. But also, the media ecosystem isn't interested, for the most part, in this narrative. There are some exceptions. But most of the media ecosystem really wants access, actually, to prominent tech companies and leaders. They want to have a cozy relationship with the tech ecosystem that they're covering. And that's a really unhealthy form of journalism, when the goal is to somehow gain favor with the industry that you're covering. But there's a lot of that I see everywhere, where the narratives that are being pushed out to wider publics are clearly tailored as PR, right, for certain kind of commercial interests in tech. So I think one of the things we need is better tech journalism, and we need, as publics, to support that and to reward those people who are actually looking at the tech ecosystem with something like a clear-eyed view and giving us an honest assessment of the benefits and risks of different kinds of AI, right? So again, the other thing we need is to get a wider understanding that AI is not one thing but many, and it's not, do we want AI or do we not want AI? It's what kind of AI do we want and what kind of AI do we deserve?
Brilliant. Let's take another question in the room. We've got one down the front here. There's also a question online, which is, what are the implications of AI on democracy? Well, the first Turing lecture this year answered just that question, and you can watch it on YouTube.
If far-right groups can exploit AI to win elections by targeting marginalized communities with disinformation, and could the marginalized groups create an AI-driven counter-narrative to fight the prejudice and reclaim political agency? And if it's yes, what might AI defense of the oppressed groups' AI tool would, for cultural preservation, political advocacy, or combating disinformation look like? And how could it disrupt the system that perpetrate their exclusion? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question fully. I do know that certainly there are tools that are used by marginalized communities, digital tools, to strengthen community and solidarity and to organize. And we've seen that for the entirety of the social media ecosystem, but also long before that, you know, when there were Usenet groups that were dedicated to specific groups that wanted to kind of find one another and build networks of solidarity. So we have older digital tools that will allow us to do that. I think the real question is the extent to which AI helps here. And again, I always want to ask, why is AI the right tool for this problem? One of the things that you mentioned is that AI is being exploited by bad actors to actually interfere with a kind of open, transparent politics and to weaponize resentments between and among and towards marginalized groups. And we saw that a lot in the last election cycle. But again, that happens by using these tools to turn us against one another. And so I'm not sure if using those tools in the same way as a sort of weapon to fight back makes a lot of sense. There's that old adage of, you know, you can't use the master's tools to bring down the master's house, and I'm not really sure about this. So I guess I'm not closed to the idea of using AI as tools for solidarity and community building. I just would want to know what that looks like and why it's better than just investing in the tools that we have. Yeah.
We've got a few questions online around AI sentience and also AGI, and whether you agree with the idea, with the kind of, with whether AI will cause catastrophic human consequences in the future. Do you think you can speak to that for a bit?
Well, I mean, I think there are certainly concerns from an environmental standpoint. I think the biggest existential risk in a material sense that we have from AI is the energy demands that Schmidt wasn't entirely wrong, right? That, I mean, I don't agree with his solution, but he's not wrong in saying that if we make AI more efficient, that's just going to create more demand for it. And we see that with lots of other efficiencies, right? If you make a system more efficient, usage goes up. So the net gain is not there. So I think we do have this problem of how can we reasonably constrain the environmental impact of AI while still getting the vital benefits that we want from it. And I think that's going to be very tricky, and it's going to require some change to the legislative structures and economic incentives that are currently driving this. The other existential risk is the one I talk about in the book, which is existential in the philosophical sense, right? Everything I talked about tonight is, in some sense, a kind of existential risk, a risk to our capacity to keep our futures open, to keep our minds open, to keep our patterns of thinking open, as opposed to narrowed onto the most efficient track by AI systems, which we increasingly use to determine the shape of the future for us. That, to me, is an existential risk because it strips out everything that makes humanity noble, really. There's no other word I would choose for it. Sort of noble and humane is the fact that we actually have that freedom. And so to lose that freedom is, I think, an intolerable loss. And even if we survived without it, I'm not sure that's a future worth building.
Definitely, that's not always the existential risk we hear about in these conversations, but
yeah.
It's...
And I'll say with respect to the worry about these systems kind of taking over and dominating us and destroying us, these things are mindless in the way I described. They don't have desires. They don't have intentions. Even if you heard the news report this week about, advanced AI systems getting surprisingly deceptive, that was because they were instructed to use any means necessary to meet the goal that they were given by their programmers and to be as strategic and as ruthless as possible in achieving the goal. They did exactly what they were told. They did not veer from their instructions. So anytime that you have a dangerous AI system, you have people who have developed and deployed that system in a dangerous way. These systems can behave in ways that are unpredictable. And if you take an unpredictable system and hook it up to a safety-critical environment without the right kinds of fail-safes and guardrails, you're going to have a disaster. So we might see something that AI does, it creates devastating outcomes. But it won't be because the AI woke up one day and decided to take us down. It'll be for the reason it always is, that people use the technology in a way that they shouldn't.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And I know we do have more questions in the room, but I'm afraid that's all we've got time for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And thanks, Shannon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for all your brilliant questions, both in the room and online. This is our final lecture of this year's Turing Lecture series. What a great note to end on. But we do invite you again to sign up to the Turing's newsletter. You can keep up to date with the next series next year and everything else we've got going on. You can also watch all of the series on YouTube already. On behalf of everyone at the Alan Turing Institute and at the Knowledge Quarter, I'd like to thank Shannon for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure to host you and hear about your work. And thank you to the whole audience and everyone who streamed online. If you're in the audience in person, please head through to the drinks reception and grab a drinks token on your way out. Thanks so much, everyone.